Welcome in this follow-up video about Mirage. Mirage, the film, the greatest action film you never heard of. This title was of course a bit clickbait style because I know many of the people who watch this channel are already very aware of Hong Kong cinema, of Chinese cinema. They have already watched many films, and so many of you had already seen Mirage. But there were quite a few who didn't, so that was a good opportunity to help getting the film a bit more famous, to be a bit more noise around it, and I hope it will help the film to be recognized as the classic that it is. Most of the questions and comments the video generated were about the availability of the film, and that's really the core problem when it comes to Mirage. Let's first state that the film was released in theater in Hong Kong in 1987. It actually did pretty well. It gathered around 16 million Hong Kong dollars at the local box office, which puts it in around the 15th position of the box office of the year when it comes to the local production, and that's pretty good for a film which was released at a time during which the Hong Kong cinema was at its most productive and vibrant, and which didn't really have any major star. I mean, Yu Hongguang had just started, and he was a mainland actor. He was not really the kind of people who would be a star in Hong Kong. The only famous person involved in the film was Tsui Siu-Ming himself, but even if he did some film previously, even if he acted in many films, and he was quite successful at TV doing TV series, he was not really a major star. He was not a Jackie Chan, he was not Andy Lau or this kind of people, or even a Chow Yun-fat. So managing to get 16 million Hong Kong dollar at the box office at that time was quite an achievement. And that begs the question of why, while the film is the great film that it is, and it had quite a successful run at the local box office, why it has become so forgotten. It kind of disappeared from the radar from fans from all over the world. The main answer to this question is the release of the film after its exploitation in theater. As far as I know, there have been only 3 releases for the film. The first one is a Japanese laserdisc with only Japanese subtitles. The other one is a VHS, which I think was released in England and which was dubbed in English. And the last one was a VCD. I'm not sure if the VCD was coming from mainland or from Hong Kong. I think it was from Hong Kong. And of course without English subtitles. And that's it. As far as I know, that's the 3 times the movie was released after its exploitation in theaters, and that explains why it kind of faded from the memory of Hong Kong film fan of the time, and it was so difficult to get rediscovered because there was not many easy way to get your hand on it and to be able to watch it. And that's really the core explanation behind its gradual disappearance. I would like to explain a little bit how I discovered the film myself, because that's emblematic of this problematic. Originally, I was not very aware of the film. I never saw anything about it in magazines or elsewhere. But I had already noticed that Tsui Siu-Ming was a talented filmmaker. He was a great action director, and so I was curious to explore further his filmography. And one of my friends from this Hong Kong movie fan circles, which was quite active during the end of the 90s, early 2000, that was a time during which there was a bit of a trend for Hong Kong, or more generally Asian cinema, and so there were a lot of new fans appearing, and I was one of them, and we were all trading, doing some exchange of more difficult film to get access to, and we were all trying to watch more, to dig further, hoping amongst these not very famous titles there were some little hidden gems which we would be thrilled and with which we would be able to discuss around and try to make more famous. That was how it was when you were a fan of Hong Kong cinema back then, trying to look for forgotten VCD or this kind of very small production and hoping to find a good one. And usually the more you would dig, the harder it would get. It's a bit like during the gold rush. You would have to at the beginning you may get a lot of gold, but the more you are trying to get, the harder it becomes. And so that was a bit the case also for Hong Kong cinema. After you had been blown away by watching John Woo, Choi Ark, and all these famous directors, and you were digging into the less famous one, you would get less and less good film in the process. You would watch a lot of bad stuff until you finally find one of those hidden gems that you were looking for. And Mirage was certainly one of them, probably the biggest hidden gem of my Hong Kong movie fan career, if we can call it this way. And so one of my friends from this Hong Kong fan circle managed to get his hand on the Japanese Laserdisc, and he asked another of my friend belonging to this circle as well to do a conversion to have the Laserdisc being transferred onto a DVD. So that he could share it, because I'm not even sure he was able to read Laserdisc himself, but he was curious about the film, so that's why he was ready to buy secondhand this Laserdisc. And so this friend did what he had to do. He did the transfer from the Laserdisc to a DVD, and I remember he sent me a message after doing that, because of course he watched the film at that time, and he told me he was blown away. It was an incredible film, and I was going to enjoy it. And he was right, of course. Once he gave me the DVD, I was able to watch it without subtitles, because, or at least with Japanese subtitles, which means in my case without subtitles. And indeed, I was really blown away. I was extremely impressed by the scale, by the skills of the film, of the action, and also the capacity of Tsui Siu-Ming to really take advantage of the incredible landscapes which China had. That was not something which was that usual back then, and he really had this Lawrence of Arabia epic feel to it, and I really enjoyed that. So it was a great discovery, and I was very thrilled by watching the film. And so of course we wrote about it on some message boards, forums. That was the way we were communicating between Hong Kong film fans back then, and we tried to have the film becoming more famous. Nowadays there is, as far as I know, it's almost impossible to get your hand on this free original format for the film, the free legal format. And the only way to watch the film is through internet. It has been, it's present, it's there on the web if you look a bit for it. And the version you will see in this case will be the one I've used for the video, which is this rip of Laserdisc, of the Japanese Laserdisc, which I'm wondering if it is our rip of Laserdisc. I'm still not sure if that's our rip or if somebody else did it. But what we didn't have back then was English subtitles, so some fans have made English subtitles for the film, and of course that's much better. This way you can appreciate it even more, even if the story itself is not that hard to understand when you are watching it without, but still it's always better to have them. I'm wondering, I think the subtitles are actually dub titles, but I may be wrong on that. I think they were taken from the VHS. Someone transcribed the dialogues from the VHS, and then they were put as subtitles on this Laserdisc rip. So maybe not the most ideal way to watch the film, that's for sure. But at least there is this option, at least that exists, and that's one of those rare cases where it's good that the internet managed to save the film from a complete extinction. When I did the video, so I did the video around 2 months before I got it published, and so when I did the video, all my love for Mirage was found back in a way. I always loved the film since I saw it, of course, but it was a long time I haven't rewatched it, and so I rewatched it for this video, and I was once again very impressed, thinking, wow, this movie is really dope. And so an idea came to my mind, and I thought, well, why not have the film finally being released officially, legally, on DVD or Blu-ray in a good copy, so that at last the film can be more easily accessible for everybody. And so I thought it would be like the logical evolution from the video I did, from the original text I wrote when I saw the films like 20 years ago, to now doing a video to promote the film and to have more people being aware of it and to watch it. What would be better than to release the film myself, to create my own label, to create my own distribution company, and have the film being released. So in order to do that, of course, I needed to get the rights of the film. And so I reached to a company, the company which is in general the one who owns the rights for the wide majority of films which were produced in mainland China back then during the 80s. Because I thought that must be them. It must be them who own the right. And so I wrote to them asking them if they did, and unfortunately the answer was no. They didn't own the right of the film. And so my quest for releasing Mirage was cut short very quickly because they didn't own the right, and I have no idea who else could own the right. And I think that's really the crux of the problem. That's really the core difficulty when it comes to Mirage. I think the rights are in a limbo. I suspect that several mainland companies were involved in the financing, the production of the film, and they either disappeared, either lost interest, and I think for this reason there was never any other releases aside from the 3 ones I've been talking about earlier, and that's why we never got a decent decent DVD or whatever else for the film, and a decent copy to watch the film as well. And because of this reason, I'm afraid there is unfortunately very little chance that will happen in the future. I'm afraid the rights for this film will remain something problematic, and will prevent any good-willed distributor to have a legal version, a legalized version of the film out with the best picture quality. And that's another question. Even if you manage to identify who owns the right for the film, I'm not even sure the copy they would have would be in good condition. So that would probably require also quite some investment in getting the print okay for you to exploit and for you to distribute. So that seems very unlikely, and that's really sad. That's really sad for such a great film not to have the treatment it deserves. Especially as in my case, I had the opportunity to interview a couple of people who have been involved in the making of the film, and that's great stories that they have. They have really some interesting insight about the making of the film. I also interviewed Tsui Siu-Ming himself about it, and he was obviously very proud about the work he had done on the film, and rightfully so once again. So I thought I could be potentially able to release some great version of the film with some interviews, with some extra, and do something really really interesting, and to have the film finally got the treatment it deserves, basically. But as I said, my hope and my ambitions were quickly cut short, and since then I think I'm afraid I've given up on that. But who knows, maybe after doing such video, somebody will see them, somebody will give me a clue, or to any other distributor, telling them, oh, I know who owns the rights of this film, and maybe finally we will be able to see a decent release of the film. I don't have very high hope on that idea, but it's always good to hope and to dream of good things to happen. So we will see. While I'm doing this video, I think it's also a good opportunity to discuss a little bit further on some of the most interesting films that Tsui Siu-Ming did aside from Mirage. I already talked a little bit about it in the main video, but I can go into further details here. Unfortunately, his early films are not that great. They are not bad, they are decent kung fu films, but you don't see so much the talent which was hiding there, and it was a bit lost in the huge quantity of production of kung fu productions being made back then, and he didn't manage to find really his identity, his personality. So you can still, of course, check the film he did before Mirage, but it's not that great, unfortunately. It's not bad, it's perfectly decent. You won't have a bad time, but you won't be blown away in the same scale as with a film like Mirage. And I think the first film which he was able to show his identity more was the one which was made before Mirage, and that's Holy Robe of the Shaolin Temple. The story of Holy Robe of Shaolin Temple is nothing incredible. It's actually very generic, very typical of this kind of kung fu films, with the Manchu, the Qing dynasty trying to oppress Shaolin Temple to make sure that they would not be able to revolt and resuscitate the Ming dynasty, as some of their members who would later become triads wanted to, or at least that's the mythology around the Shaolin Temple. And in reality, it was not that clear cut, but maybe that will be for a subject for another video, the historical aspect of the Shaolin Temple against the mythological aspect, which has been so often used in films. But anyway, so the story in this one is pretty generic, and that's not surprising because, as I said, during that time, mainland China was trying to revitalize its film industry, and when it comes to kung fu films, when it comes to action film, and so they had to start almost from scratch, so they could not really go very far when it comes to originality in their script. I mean, they were kind of following the trends, and they were not innovating much, as there was already a lot of work to do on these films. And so that's the case here. But what stands out in the film is really the scale, once again, that Tsui Siu-Ming is able to give, thanks to the very impressive landscapes and real locations. He really went to the real Shaolin Temple. He really moved around the country in order to shoot it, and that shows, and he's really able to capture his character in their environment, and that really adds some credibility to the story and a real visual flair to the film itself. And of course you have some very good choreography, very good actions, thanks to the performers and their stunt doubles. That was a given, but that's the combination of both, to have great Hong Kong style choreography in this real mainland location, which makes the film a nice kung fu film, even if it's not anything groundbreaking when it comes to its story. But at least it's on the same level I would put to the first Shaolin Temple. The first Shaolin Temple was not as good, I would say, to use the location and And the choreography were not as intricate, but they had some other good points, of course, in the original Shaolin Temple, including Jet Li, who had a lot of charisma and who was really carrying the film very strongly. But anyway, Holy Robe of the Shaolin Temple, that's the first step in this direction for Tsui Siu-Ming, on a quite recommendable film. Just be aware that it's nothing groundbreaking when it comes to its story. Then, of course, we had Mirage, and then later on he was also involved in Born to Defend, which is officially the first and only film directed by Jet Li. And make no mistakes, Jet Li was involved in the film, he was involved in the script making process, he was involved in the direction, but he got hurt, he got wounded during the shooting, and so he asked for Tsui Siu-Ming's help. And from there on, Tsui Siu-Ming really carried most of the directorial duty. Jet Li would still be involved behind the camera, but he was more following by that point what Tsui Siu-Ming would ask him to do. But so at the end, you can basically say that it is a co-direction. There is Jet Li's personality is present in the film, but there is also some very Tsui Siu-Ming characteristics. For example, the introduction, the opening scene with the war against the Japanese has a bit of the same vibe as what he did in Mirage. There is this mix of mainland style, a lot of figuration, a lot of military hardware, a big scale of action, but with the know-how, Hong Kong know-how when it comes to stunt work, when it comes to choreography, and that's the combination of both, which made Mirage such a great film. And you can have a bit of that in the opening of the film. Personally, I'm really like Born to Defend. I really have a small crush on the film. That's probably the closest Jet Li has been in the shoes of Bruce Lee, of course with Fist of Legend as well. And so there is a bit this vibe of an update on what Bruce Lee did with films like Fist of Fury or Way of the Dragon, and I like that. I like to see this aspect. There is also a little bit of social commentary. It's not too deep, too strong, but there is still that, which is probably a bit of the mainland touch, because they have always been actually very good at doing this kind of things. And so it adds, once again, an element of realism to the film, and also the action is very grounded. There is no wires. The action feels very real. It feels very painful when they are hit, and I really like this kind of action style, and so I really enjoy that. I like also the confrontation with the main opponent, Kurt Roland Peterson, who was impressive, who worked very well, I thought, visually against Jet Li, a bit like Karim Abdul-Jabbar did with Bruce Lee. But personally, I prefer this this version, the Tsui Siu-Ming version of this kind of giant fight. I prefer the choreography there. But to be fair, Bruce Lee did it 20 years before, so if he had redone it 20 years after, his choreography would probably have been perfected as well. So let's not be too unfair to him there. But anyway, I really like Born to Defend, and Tsui Siu-Ming really brought his expertise when it comes to action, and it really helped, in my opinion, to make the film much more memorable than if Jet Li had been in control from the beginning to the end. And so I really recommend it, especially because that's a movie which is not too hard to get your hands on, which unfortunately it's not the case for most of the career or the filmography of Tsui Siu-Ming. So this one is one of the most easy to get access to. So if you haven't yet, you should really check it out. I really think it's a fun film. And the film which he has done, which is the closest to Mirage, is Bury Me High, which he did in the early 90s. Once again, it was shot in China. It was shot in Yunnan, of course, because Tsui Siu-Ming had these mainland connections. So he once again is able to really use the beautiful landscapes of Yunnan for the best. And he also had on this one quite a big budget. It was co-produced by Golden Harvest. And so he's able once again to put on display his expertise in action when it comes to these military scenes, when it comes to the action choreography, the kung fu style action choreography, and also stunt works. He managed to combine all of them. He also has a nice cast to work with, which really is to the advantage of the film, because he has Moon Lee, who was kind of one of his students in a way. She had been in several successful TV series which he had directed and produced, and he was kind of a teacher in some way, a mentor, so it's quite logical that she ended up being in Bury Me High. You also had Chin Carlock, who is always an asset for any film he appears in. You had Yunhua, also a great actor, and you had Sibel Wu. You also had Cho Wing, who was one of the original stuntmen with who he worked on films like Mirage, and who became a very successful action director in his own right. So it's really a nice cast, a nice landscapes, and once again the possibility to use this scale to its best. He also had a component which would appear many times in his filmography, which is an interest for Feng Shui. He has a real interest for the subject, and he likes to use it in his films, and so there is this aspect also in Bury Me High, and so this little fantasy touch also brings some kind of difference to what he did with Mirage. And so for all these reasons, Bury Me High is a very enjoyable film, probably the second best film in Tsui Siu-Ming's career, in the footsteps of Mirage. It's not as good as Mirage, I would argue, but it's really just one level below, which is already a big achievement. And it has also another advantage as Born to Defend. It's quite easy to get access to. It was released on DVD thanks to being a co-production with Golden Harvest, so it's not that difficult to get your hands on it. And the last one I want to mention is Champions. It's really the last big production he did at a time when this kind of co-production with mainland was becoming the normal way for Hong Kong cinema to do. And this one was around the thematic of the Olympics, because that was the time of the Beijing Olympics. So he was trying to ride that wave, and he is talking about some young Chinese athlete who wants to compete in the Olympics of the time at the early 20th century, if I remember correctly, which is not a bad idea. I think it's actually an interesting concept. It could lead to something interesting. Unfortunately, the result is not that convincing. It has a lot of the problems from this early co-production with an over-reliance on CGI, which were not in the best quality, and it was a bit cheesy when it came to the emotions of the character. He was putting also a little bit too much already of this kind of nationalism, which would become even stronger nowadays, but even there I think he was pushing the envelope a little bit too far. And also, which didn't help, the young actors were not that convincing, especially the ladies, unfortunately. So that was not that great when it comes to what was supposed to be the heart of the film, this film about Olympics. But the film is not completely useless. It's still at least worth a look, in my opinion, thanks to its action scenes. Tsui Siu-Ming showed that he still had the expertise. He was still able to choreograph great action scenes, and that was especially the case with the main villain of the film, who was an actor, a mainland actor who had been in the films which were made in the 80s when they were trying to resuscitate the kung fu films in mainland, and he had been very active back then. He was quite instrumental in this kind of films, and so now he was being used by Tsui Siu-Ming 20 years later, and he's a real martial art master. In the film he's doing some eagle claw kung fu, and you can see that he has this mastery from decades of practice, and each time he arrives on the screen it really energizes the film. He really makes it better, and of course as soon as he fights, that's a joy to watch. And so I would say that's really for him, for his action scenes, that you should check Champions. You also have Yo Guang, who is once again there in the supporting part, but he also got to fight a bit. So of course it's great to see Yo Guang, who was discovered by Tsui Siu-Ming in Holy Robe of the Shaolin Temple, and who was the star of Mirage, and with an actor that personally I really like. So it's really great to see him there under the camera of Tsui Siu-Ming once again, several decades later, and once again showing off his acting on martial arts skills. So that's really the main interest of Champions, and if you have liked his art of choreography, his way of designing action, you will still find some good stuff in Champions, even if you will have to deal also with other aspects of the film which are really less commendable, I'm afraid. But anyway, so that's for this short, a bit more detailed overview of Tsui Siu-Ming's career. If you haven't seen Mirage yet, I want to encourage you even more once again to watch the film. And if you have liked Mirage, which you should, because how can any decent movie fan dislike Mirage? That would be impossible. So you will like it. You will want to watch more of Tsui Siu-Ming's filmography, so you can go in the direction I just gave you by watching films like Holy Robe of the Shaolin Temple, Born to Defend, Bury Me High, and even Champions. So that's it for this short follow-up video about Mirage. I want to thank you all for your support, for watching the video, for participating, for some of you to the tipeee. Any support is greatly appreciated, and I hope you will continue to support the channel, and you will continue to like the video I'm doing. And I will see you very soon on another video on the channel of the House of Asian Cinema. See you soon.